We're gonna talk today about what it really means to authentically succeed. Now that sounds kind of hackneyed. You notice what we have up here on the screens. I call it "Unleash the Masterpiece," and the reason, and I subtitled it "Authentic Success." A book I've written that I believe will be made available to you later on is called "Achieving Authentic Success." I wrote that a number of years ago, and we've built a whole body of content around that. Because I believe fundamentally everybody has a definition of success somewhere. And we all, even if we can't articulate it, and we all move toward a definition of success. And I believe that one of the most important things we can do is define what it means for us to succeed, particularly at the end of our life looking back. I've interviewed hundreds of leaders around the world, and I've asked them, very successful people, and I've asked them the same question. That is the same closing question. At the end of your life, how you know you've succeeded? And it's been really telling. We're gonna drill down on that a little bit today, and then in this session, and then in the other sessions, I'm gonna try to give you some practical takeaways on how to put this to work in your personal life and in your interpersonal life. Now, the reason I have up on the screen this particular visual, it's a famous masterpiece, and what is it? You know? Yeah, it's Starry Night, and it's by Van Gogh, and it's just considered one of the great masterpieces. By the way, he did that when he was in an insane asylum, looking out the window. He actually manufactured the little community, but he was looking at the Starry Night. And even from an insane asylum, he created this incredible masterpiece. And the big idea I'd like for you to get today in this and the rest of our sessions is that it would be to get a view in your life, in your mind, that your life was meant to be a masterpiece. That's my passion in life, to help people identify their whole life as a masterpiece, develop it as a masterpiece, and then unleash it in those around them, in their family, in their business, in their community. Because I believe we were created to be great works of art. And we're going to drill down on how to do that in very specific areas during our time together today. So keep that in mind. Unleash the masterpiece. Think of your life as a masterpiece, and how do you bring that to play, both professionally and personally? How do you become everything you ought to be? One of the things that gets me up every morning is this quotation. It says, "Most of us go to the grave with the music still in us." And one of my passions is to get that music to come out of us to the max. So this isn't success motivation hype. This is just going to be incredibly practical things on how we identify and develop our incredible worth and become everything we can ultimately become. So as we get into this today, what I want to do is I want to process with you the whole concept of unleash the masterpiece. And to start this, I want you to do an exercise. So take your sheet and turn it over, your notes, and turn it into a landscape mode, so it's in a horizontal mode. And then I want you to do a lifeline. And here's what the lifeline is. On the left side of the paper is the beginning of your life. At the end side, at the right side is the end of your life. The bottom is your failures or your challenges over life, the difficult times or events. The top is your successes over time. And I want you to do a little bit of a lifeline. Now, for you engineers, don't break this down into 6-month increments. This is a gut check. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to graph your life. Then you're going to hold this up in triads, groups of 3 around your table, and you're going to say, here's what this means. And so I want you to do a little chart. So think of your childhood, think of your teen years, think of your 20s and young adult years, and then your middle-age years, and some of you will think a little bit further than that, and chart your life. It's going to look a little bit like the Dow Jones. Hopefully it's moving upward. But it's based on events, your high points, your low points, your successes, your failures, however you define them. And then once you're done, you're going to hold that up. We give you another 2 minutes to show and tell with one another around the table. Okay? You got it? Beginning of your life, end of your life. You're going to chart successes, failures as you define them in any or every area in your life. Go, 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 go. You're doing a chart, but what you might want to start with is say, okay, in my childhood years, boy, here was a great experience. Maybe here was a negative experience. Just put a little X where they were, like So imagine, just think of the first section as your childhood, then your teen years, and then your 20s and 30s. By the way, I want you to project this to the end of your life. And so I want you to put a check mark by wherever you are now, and then how you project your life going from this point forward. Okay, go, 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 go. It'll look something like this, maybe. That's the point. Beginning of your life on the left, end of your life on the right, success at the top, failures at the bottom, however you define them. You're putting a check mark on where you are now and how you anticipate it going from this point on. But it can look any way you feel like it ought to look. Okay, find two other people. Try to do this in triads, just three. And this is show and tell. So I want you to hold up your sheet and say, here's what the highs and lows mean. Be as transparent or not as you want to be, but the values kind of getting inside your mind. And then here's why I put the check where I did and why I anticipate it going the way it's going from here. Do it in triads, though, groups of three. So find two other people around you and choose them. You might turn around, like here, two guys going there. Be sure you're in three so you can break it up. If you don't have three, turn around the table to someone right behind you. Okay, go, go, go. You got about 40 seconds apiece to work through this. Okay. But by the way, this is a great exercise to do with an entire team. I have people who spend an entire day at a retreat going through this process because it really gets down to how you're defining success or wins or failures. So just going through that, what was the response? What were the insights that popped to your head going through that process? Good. You're Canadians. You guys are sharp, so I expect big things here.
Was optimistic. We all ended up like we're.
Yeah.
But everybody's got times where it either didn't go well, or they didn't think they were doing well, or were feeling well,
Yeah.
or something outside made them pause for a bit.
Yeah. And it's kind of good to know that, isn't it? That everybody has ups and downs. My experience is we almost all have ups and downs every day. I mean, life's like that. We have good things and not such good things that happen every day. What else came to mind as you went through that process?
First thinking about your failures and then suddenly you realize your recovery from it and
Yeah.
it makes you feel much better about it.
Yeah.
That's why always in the chart you will see the escalation because you start thinking more positive about
Yeah.
yourself and achievements that you're actually planning to do ahead.
Yeah, that's really good. We learn from it. We make adjustments. We realize that the sun is going to come out in the morning and things bounce back and it doesn't last. What else?
Well, that's right. I mean, it was easier to find the rough times than build around it, and when we started going up again, the rough times were probably the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, that's really true. I did this once with a bunch of my vice presidents, and one of my guys, a chart looked like this. There wasn't a wiggle in it. So, I mean, I gave him about 10 minutes to work on their chart, and that was his chart. And so when we were done, this guy was about 55, had run a major business, owned and operated a major business, and very sharp guy. And when he got done, I said, D, his name was Dwight, but I said, D, I said, this tells me two things about you. I said, the first thing is you got a really good attitude. He goes, yeah, I think I do. I said, so, everything's just positive. You're just constantly moving up. I said, that's good. That's the good news. The bad news is you're in absolute denial. He goes, what do you mean? I said, now let me get this right. Your wife is suffering from an addiction and is quite ill, right? Yeah. He goes, one of your sons just went south and kind of, got into disengaged from the family and is out on his own and is having all sorts of problems, right? Yeah. I said, you were overseeing your dad's business when it went bankrupt 2 years ago, right? He goes, yeah. I said, doesn't that even create a little squiggle in your deal? He goes, no, because those things all work out. And what that brought to mind for me was, I'm a big believer in this. We should always have a positive attitude, always. But we should also always be critical thinkers. A lot of times wisdom in life is like two rails of a train track that are together. always have a positive attitude, always be a critical thinker. Now, what happens is some of us that are critical thinkers can let that turn over into a critical attitude or come across that way. Some of us who are positive attitude people can turn that into sloppy thinking. So the worst thing would be to be a sloppy thinker with a critical attitude. Instead, you want to be a positive attitude person with critical thinking. So always think critically, but also always have a positive attitude. I'm a believer that our attitude does determine our altitude. It's our perspective in life. Another time I was doing this with a group of CEOs, including several senior level leaders in Canada. And actually, we were in Washington, D.C. doing this at the Ritz-Carlton, but I did this exercise, and here was one of the leaders in Canada, in the political world and in business, multi-millionaire. He was at a table with the president, or the chairman of one of the largest insurance companies in the United States and the president of one of the Canadian airlines. So very powerful group of people, and they were going through this, and I was walking around as they were talking, and we had more time, so they spent quite a bit of time on this. And I heard the fairly mild-mannered chairman of this large insurance company say to this Canadian gentleman this. He said, "Shame on you, shame on you." And I thought, holy smokes, what's going on here? So I got a little closer, and I realized what was going on. This guy's chart looked like this, and then it went like this, and he put the check about 2/3 of the way down. So, man, he was like out of here. Now, this was a guy, and I heard what happened. He says, "Why did you do that?" He said to this guy, and he said, "Well, look I'm 77 years old. My body's going downhill. I'm still the chairman of our company, but I'm not the CEO. I'm not making the money. I'm enjoying it, but I'm not making it. I'm not quite as useful. My wife died a couple years ago, so I'm lonely." He said, "That's just a reality. I'm just on my way out." And this guy got in his face, and it was really healthy, kind of spooky, but he said, "Look, you've got this incredible wisdom. You can be mentoring and developing leaders. You have incredible assets. You can be funding the transformation of the political world in Canada, which you want to do." He said, "You can be funding good ventures all around the world." And he said, "Who's to say you're not to find another woman and marry her and have a companion for the rest of your life?" And he goes, "Well, I don't think that'll be the case." But actually, in a short time, this guy did a 180-degree change. And in the days to come, he started mentoring many or a few key leaders around the country and around the world. I happen to be one of them, so I got to benefit from that. He gave away millions and millions of dollars for good. He realized how valuable his time was, and he got very strategic on the political system within the country. And he met a woman a year later. They got married and had about 8 good years together still. Because he did a 180-degree turnaround, because he realized he was defining success inappropriately or in an unhealthy way. He was just tying it to his position and his power and so on. So what I want us to talk about for a few minutes today is this. It really begins with how you define success. And key is, if you're going to break loose from the crowd and have a life of impact, you're going to make a leap. You just want to be sure you're jumping in the right bowl. You're going in the right direction. Someone has said, I climbed the ladder of success only to find it leaning against the wrong wall. You want to be sure you're against the right wall. So what I want to do is get us to think about success for just a couple of minutes, and I want to answer 3 questions. What we're going to try to cover here now is what success is not just, what success, or what I'd call authentic success is, and then how do we succeed authentically. Now, first is, what is success not? Now, when people talk about success, what do they normally talk about? Yeah, our job, our money, family, our wealth, of course, our money, our prestige, how people view us. I've concluded it's really 5 things: power, prosperity, position, prestige, and pleasure. It's those things. And the dynamic here is that people tend to get caught up in those definitions of success, and then that starts to drive us. And yet the reality is, we all know at the end of the day that those things are great, but they're just they're just not enough. I mean, I think having power is a great thing, and prosperity obviously is a great thing, and prestige and pleasure is a great thing, but it's never quite enough. In fact, what some wealthy leaders have said is, Rockefeller said, "I've made many millions, but they have brought me no happiness." Vanderbilt said, "The care of 200 million is enough to kill anyone. There's no pleasure in it." Henry Ford said, "I was happier when doing a mechanic's job." And Andrew Carnegie said, "Millionaires seldom smile." Now, some of us would say, I'd like a little of that misery and a little of that pressure handling, all that. Yeah, I'll volunteer to give it a shot. And the point isn't that those things obviously are bad. The point is that they're just not enough. And when we stop and think about it, particularly when we're in an environment like this, and it forces us to evaluate what are those things that are really important, and we see very poor people and we see their joy, amazingly, and their delight and their deep appreciation for the smallest things, even just a roof over their head, it starts to affect the way we see success. And most of us know, when we just stop and think about this, and I found this to be true all around the world, it's not just those things. A number of years ago, Glenn Bland wrote a great book on success, simply called Success. And in this book, he provides what I think is one of the best examples on priorities and success. And he talks about a meeting that took place in 1923 at the Edgewater Hotel in Chicago. And it was the world's elite, the power brokers, really the successful financiers of the day. And these giants included Charles Schwab, who ruled the world of money, president of the largest steel company in America; Samuel Insull, who was the president of the largest utility company; Howard Hobson, president of the largest gas company; Arthur Cutten, the great wheat speculator; Richard Whitney, president of the New York Stock Exchange; Albert Fall, president of Interior in President Harding's cabinet; Jesse Livermore, the great bear on Wall Street; Ivor Kruger, head of the world's largest monopoly; and Leon Fraser, president of the Bank of International Settlements. In that day, they were the movers and shakers of the day. Then he looked at their lives 25 years later. Here was the meeting in 1923. 25 years later, he looked at their lives, and here was the story. Charles Schwab went bankrupt. Insull died in a foreign land, a fugitive from justice, penniless. Howard Hobson was insane. Arthur Cutten was insolvent and died abroad. Richard Whitney had just been released from Sing Sing prison. Albert Fall had been pardoned from prison and died at home broke. Jesse Livermore committed suicide. Ivor Kruger committed suicide. Leon Fraser committed suicide. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you make a lot of money, you're going to go in the loony bin or, kill yourself. But what I am saying is we see over and over and over again that those things just aren't enough. We can have all the money in the world, it's just not going to be enough. There's more to it than that. We all know that in our heart of heart and in our gut. I love what John Steinbeck said when he wrote to Adlai Stevenson. He said, "A strange species we are. We can stand anything God and nature throw at us, save only plenty. If I wanted to destroy a nation, I would give it too much, and I would have it on its knees, miserable and greedy and sick." And I believe that's what's happened to a great extent in the United States and in much of the Western world. The more we get, the more we tend to get greedy, the more we tend to get hardened, the more we tend to lose perspective on the things that are really important. So I want to suggest that success is not just power, prosperity, position, prestige, and pleasure. And I want to suggest that you think about it not just as those things, and I think most of you probably do. On the other hand, what is success? That's the second question, and I contend that success has much more to do with things like, everyone has told me I've interviewed, and I've asked the same exit question: at the end of your life, how will you know you've succeeded? None of them said power, prosperity, position, prestige, and pleasure. So, one guy said, "You've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. You can't take it with you." They said things like, how did my kids turn out? What kind of relationship did I have with my spouse? Did I have close friends in my life who really cared? I remember a leader had 20,000 people in his organization, made millions of dollars literally every month. lived in a home that George Washington lived in on Valley Forge Park, big, gorgeous home. A great family, a great guy. I mean, a tremendous person. But he said, Ron, I guess I'll know I've succeeded by the number of people who weep at my funeral. And his point was, have I touched people enough at the core that they're going to be even concerned that I passed through life and impacted them at some point, that they're going to be grieved that I die. They all said, basically, did my life, was it life of impact? Did I live a life of excellence? Did I live a virile life, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually? Did I enjoy the journey? Did I have joy? Was I happy at the deepest level? Did I help others? Did I make a difference? Did I contribute? Did I leave some kind of legacy? And my guess is everybody in this room would say the same kind of thing. The key is, how do we get our lives in alignment with that, and how do we turn that into reality? The fundamental reality we've seen is that true success for these people all came down to one of two things, or both of these things. Is my life complete? Am I winning in all vital areas of my life? Not just professionally, but personally. Not just publicly, but privately. Am I holistically successful? Am I winning in my family? Am I winning in my friendships? Am I winning physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Am I holistically winning? Am I a complete person? And secondly, am I living a life of contribution? Am I giving things back? And of course, you realize that when you're here at the Homes of Hope, engaged in pouring into the lives of families, and in a couple of days or in a day and a half, as you did this time, building homes and turning the keys over to families that are so appreciative. Well, we know the value of that. We've experienced it. So it's being a contributor and being a person who's complete. It's giving back. And the secret to getting here, I believe, is, I call the secret of the tree. It's to focus on the roots, not the fruit. We live in a lovely home in San Diego, California, about a 3/4 acre lot. We have lots of trees, fruit-bearing trees. And I watch them. They never work hard at producing fruit. They naturally produce fruit. They work at getting their roots to go into the nutrient soil. And I believe the way we succeed holistically, by the way, maximize our ability to experience power, prosperity, position, prestige, and pleasure, all of which are great things that could be used for good, but also maximize our opportunity to have maximum joy and completeness and value in the lives of others, and contribution, and healthy families, intimacy and relationship, all those things. The way we get there is we define clearly what success is, completeness and contribution, A, and then B, we focus on the roots. That is, we develop the right skills that turn into habits, that turn into competencies, that turn into unconscious competencies, just a way of life. And if we focus in the right attitudes in the area of, or the right principles in the area of our attitudes and our beliefs and our commitments, I believe we will naturally experience this kind of holistic success or authentic success that I'm talking about. And that's what we've seen with people, all around the world. What we've done over time is identified the principles that we think are non-negotiable to getting there, and we put it in a book called Achieving Authentic Success that I think will be available to those of you here today, and as a gift from the company. But in this, what I did is went out and researched all the literature that we possibly could, the best thought leaders in success and what I call personal leadership in the world, to identify what were those root skills that are needed to become successful. And there are these. And so let me give you an overview of those, and then we're going to drill down on a few of those in our subsequent sessions. I turned these, by the way, into an acrostic, maximizers, which is really great for the English-speaking world. It really messes up my translators internationally. The book is in Spanish. It's Optimisere. In German, it's Leitmotif. They're still trying to work with an acrostic, but in the language, I really screwed it up for them. But basically, these are the universal principles. And by principles, I mean I think they're always applicable. Now, they're always contextual, but I think the principles are always the same. So, you'll get more of this in the book itself, and we'll give you a feel for some of them in the next 4 sessions. But the principles are, M is make things happen. That simply means I take responsibility for my life. I am not a victim. I am proactive. I'm not reactive to life. And I do that by developing good habits. The Greek forefathers said, first we make our habits, then our habits make us. And I believe that. So I believe that success results from good habits. Failure results from bad habits, professionally and personally. So it's all about developing skill sets and habits, good habits. A is achieve personal significance. And that's really the self-esteem concept. And the balance there is, I believe, if you think of two rails of a train track again, I believe we should always realize our worth, that we are masterpieces that are to be identified, developed, cultivated, and unleashed. But I also believe we're just loaded with soft spots. So we're special, but we have soft spots. We have weaknesses. So I'm going to give you a little humility test now. I want you to think of the last time someone criticized you. How did you respond? Nothing. Some of you say, like, on the way here this morning, you know. Okay, think of the last time you were criticized by someone. Can you have it in mind? And if you don't, you're probably like my buddy who's in denial, because we all get it enough. Well, some years ago, I remember I started my career as a president of a set of graduate schools around the world. And I came in to be president when I was at the age of 29, which was a little odd since my average age student was 31. And I didn't know quite what I was doing, but I was glad to be in the role. And one day, one of my students came up to me and said, Dr. Jensen, can we go out to lunch? I'd like to talk to you. I said, sure. And so over lunch, he said, you're a great leader and fabulous communicator. You're my role model. And I said, well, thank you so much. So I picked up the tab. And then he said, there are two more things that are kind of personal. And I thought, great, I can hardly wait to hear them. And I knew what he was going to say, and that is, you were just, boy, I tell you, Martin Luther King and Ron Jensen, and, these guys are all up in this. And I said, yeah, go ahead and tell me. He said, well, there's two things in your life I don't believe you're aware of that I believe impede your leadership effectiveness. And a first-year student. And my first thought was, who do you think you are, you punk? That's what I thought. But I didn't say that. I said, well, that's interesting. Tell me what they are. And he told me. One was how my wife and I trained our kids. We had all the first-year students in our home in small groups for, like our short dinner. And we had younger children, and he saw how we were disciplining them. He thought we were too permissive. I love that. And the second one had to do with something I wasn't doing in leadership on the campus. And so as I was leaning forward, getting ready to give him the benefit of my wisdom, it was as though this supernatural hand grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, pulled me back, and shook me a few times and said, hey, Jensen, why are you so surprised someone should see something in your life with which you need to deal? Imagine if he saw everything I see. I said, whoa, good point. And then I said, I just realized I had no reason to be embarrassed. Now, think about that. Does anybody know how bad you really are? I don't think so. I mean, most of us don't get up in the morning and go, how can I look stupid, or how can I act as dumb as possible? We try to put the best foot forward. And the reality is we're all a lot worse than what anybody sees. We're also a lot better than what anybody sees. That's the point. So it's living in tension with that. X is X out the negatives. That's all about attitude. We're going to talk about that when we talk about dealing with stress in our next session. I is internalize right principles. We all need to have a value system. We need to have principles around which we build our lives. C.S. Lewis said, you'll never know a line's crooked unless you have a straight line to put next to it. We all need straight lines. And then M is march to a mission. That's just being a mission-driven, purpose-driven individual, not just in our professional life, but our entire life. What's our mission in life? Why are we here? It's great to get a grasp of that. Then the next I is for integrate all of life. That's about work-life balance. We're going to talk about that a little bit later this afternoon. And then Z is zero in on caring for people. How do we build people up? We're going to do a session or two on that. How do we build a relationship where there's real unity, not just in the professional side, but on our personal side? How do we resolve conflicts? How do we build up people? And then E is to energize internally. That's developing our inner life from the inside out. That's really what we're talking about during most of our time here, the next few sessions. And then R is to realign rigorously. That's to make constant mid-course corrections. So every day we have challenges, and we can either deal with them as problems and get frustrated by them, or we can develop the skills to make constant mid-course corrections, not waste our emotional energy. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then S is stay the course. It just means we just don't quit. So that's the framework. And our conclusion has been those 10 principles tend to be a good essence of what it means to develop right roots in our life. And if we can build them, then we develop what I call a lifetime operating system. In our computers, you know, it could be Windows, it could be Apple, yay, Apple, or it could be Linux. But there's an operating system, and the software always submits to an operating system. And I think one of the things we get in trouble with is we don't develop an operating system for life, or a lifetime operating system. And basically, we've built this, and we've trained people in this around the world to develop a lifetime operating system for them, so they have a framework around which they can move toward completeness and maximum contribution. And the net effect is, I think as we do this, is we're able to become the craftsmen at living that we ought to be. And again, I want you to keep that artisanship in life, craftsman in living, unleashing the masterpiece in your mind as the metaphor. So that's the overview of what we're going to be talking about. That's kind of the framework for it. We're going to zero in on some specifics for that. But what I want you to do now for a few minutes, the next 10 minutes, is simply go back to those groups you were talking to. And it all begins with your definition of success. So here I want you to answer this question. At the end of your life, how are you going to know you've succeeded? Now, I want you to think about it for just a couple of minutes, take a couple of notes, and then in your groups of 3 or 4 if you want, I want you to talk about it. But how are you going to know you've been successful at the end of your life? What will that encompass? You got it?